The old alien sat in the corner booth of the Veteran Center, his body bent and broken from years of war. Once, Commander Yulkoth had been the pride of the Zephyrian Empire, leading massive fleets across the galaxy. Now, his dark shell was cracked and scarred, telling the story of battles he wished he could forget. Across from him sat a young female reporter named Narration. Her bright compound eyes sparkled with curiosity as she placed a small recording device on the scratched metal table between them. The device hummed softly, ready to capture every word of what might be the most important interview in galactic history. "Commander Yulkoth," she began, her voice respectful but eager. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me today. The people of our empire need to understand what really happened during the Third Galactic War." Yulkoth's forearms trembled slightly as he reached for his drink. The liquid inside was pale blue, meant to calm his nerves, but nothing could truly ease the memories that haunted him. "What happened was madness," he said quietly. "Pure, terrifying madness." The reporter leaned forward. "The official reports say we were defeated by a primitive species called humans. But how is that possible? Our empire has conquered over 200 worlds. We have technology that other species can only dream of." A bitter laugh escaped from Yulkoth's throat. "That's what we all thought. The High Command briefed us before the first attack. They showed us pictures of the human homeworld, a simple blue and green planet they call Earth. They told us these humans had just learned to travel between stars. They said it would be easy." He paused, staring at the recording device as if it were an enemy. "We were told that humans were soft creatures. They lived short lives, had weak bodies, and fought with simple weapons. The intelligence reports said they spent most of their time fighting each other instead of working together. It seemed perfect, another quick conquest to add to our empire's glory." Narration made notes on her electronic pad. "What was your first target?" "New Geneva," Yulkoth replied, his voice growing darker. "A human colony world on the edge of their territory. Population 2 million. Defenses, basic planetary shields, and a small orbital station. We brought a full battle fleet, 12 dreadnoughts, 40 destroyers, and over 100 fighter craft. It should have been over in hours." The old commander's eyes seemed to look through the walls of the Veteran Center, seeing something far away and terrible. "I remember standing on the bridge of my flagship, watching the human world grow larger on our screens. My officers were excited. Some of them had never seen real combat before. They thought this would be their chance to prove themselves against a weak enemy. But something was wrong from the beginning," he continued. "When we demanded their surrender, the human response was unexpected. Their commander, a human named Kim, sent us a message that still gives me nightmares." Nirasa's antenna twitched with interest. "What did he say?" Yulkoth closed his eyes. Remembering, he said, "Welcome to hell. We've been waiting for you." Then he cut the communication. No fear, no begging, no offers to negotiate. Just, "Welcome to hell." The recording device captured the silence that followed. In the background, other veterans moved through the center, like ghosts, their own battles etched into their faces and bodies. "My tactical officer laughed," Yulkoth said suddenly. "Lieutenant Zarman thought it was funny that such a weak species would try to sound threatening. He said humans were probably too stupid to understand they were about to die." The commander's voice became very quiet. "Zarman didn't survive the first day." Narration felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. "What happened when the fighting began?" "Everything went wrong," Yulkoth said simply. "Every single thing we thought we knew about warfare, about conquest, about how intelligent species behave when faced with superior force. All of it was wrong when it came to humans." He reached for his drink again. his hands shaking more noticeably now. The first wave of our fighters approached their orbital defenses. Standard procedure. Destroy their weapons, force surrender. Land occupation troops, clean and efficient. But the humans didn't follow the script. He continued. Their fighters came at us like they were already dead. No formation, no tactics we recognized. Just pure aggression, and they were making sounds. Sounds neurosci-esque, screaming, yelling. Some were singing. We could hear them over the battle communications. Our pilots had never experienced anything like it. How do you fight an enemy that sounds happy to die? Yulgath's voice broke slightly. The worst part was their eyes. When our ships exploded. When their own ships were destroyed. When death was certain. They never stopped looking at us. Never stopped fighting. I watched the human pilot's fighter get cut in half by our plasma cannons. And she kept firing her weapons even as her ship fell apart around her. The veteran center grew. Quiet round them as other aliens sensed the weight of the story being told. Even the staff moved more carefully, as if afraid to disturb the testimony of one of their empire's greatest military disasters. That was just the beginning. Yulgath whispered. We had no idea what we had awakened. The recording device continued to hum softly as Yulgath stared into his drink, watching the blue liquid swirl like a tiny storm. His scarred hands gripped the cup tighter as he prepared to relive the worst moments of his military sea. The battle for New Geneva was supposed to last 6 hours, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Instead, it lasted 6 days. 6 days of pure nightmare. Near us I waited patiently, her pen ready to capture every detail of what had become. Legend among their people. The first defeat of a Zephyrian fleet in over 3 centuries. Our first attack wave went in at dawn on the first day. Yulgath continued. 48 fighters, led by squadron leader Hextall. He was one of our best pilots. With over 100 successful missions, the human defenders had maybe 20. Small ships protecting their orbital station. The old commander's eyes grew distant. Hextall reported that the human pilots were flying in patterns he had never seen before. No formation. No discipline. Just wild movements that made no sense. He called them space madmen in his first report. What happened to him? Mirasai asked softly. A human pilot named Park destroyed his ship. Yulgath said, but not in any way we expected. Her fighter was badly damaged. Weapons offline. Engines failing. Any normal pilot would have ejected or tried to escape. Instead, she turned her dying ship into a weapon. The reporter's compound eyes widened. She crashed into him. Worse, Yulgath said, his voice cracking. She aimed for his cockpit. We watched it happen on the battle screens. Her face was visible through her ship's window just before impact. She was smiling, actually smiling as she flew to her death. The memory seemed to physically pain the old warrior. He took a long drink before continuing. That was our first lesson about humans. They don't fear death the way other species do. They use it as a weapon. The ground battle was even worse. He said, we landed our shock troops on the planet's surface, 20,000 of our finest warriors, equipped with the best armor and weapons in the galaxy. They were met by perhaps 5,000 human defenders. Mirasai made notes quickly. Those odds should have been impossible to overcome. Should have been. Yulgath agreed. But humans don't care about odds. Their ground commander was someone. Coldly, our intelligence said he was a simple colonial defense officer. No formal military training. We expected him to surrender when he saw our forces. The commander's voice grew hollow. Instead, he sent us a message. Just 2 words. Come on. The first assault went badly. Yulgath continued. Human weapons were primitive compared to us, but they used them in ways we never expected. They turned buildings into fortresses, streets into killing zones. Every corner, every window, every doorway became a source of death. He paused, struggling with the memories. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how they fought. When they were wounded. "What do you mean?" Nirasai asked. On the second day, our forces cornered Commander Lee in a bombed-out building. He had been hit by plasma fire. Half his chest was gone. Any normal being would have died instantly. But he kept fighting. Yulgath's voice became very quiet. He used his own blood to paint targeting coordinates on the walls for his artillery. Our soldiers found him hours later, still alive. Still directing his troops with hand signals. He had turned his own dying body into a command center. The reporter felt sick. That's impossible. No one can survive that kind of damage. Humans can. Yulgath said simply. That's what makes them so terrifying. They don't know when to quit. They don't understand the word impossible. By the third day, our troops were requesting medical evacuations for mental trauma. He continued. Warriors who had conquered entire planets were breaking down. They couldn't handle fighting an enemy that got stronger when wounded, that laughed when facing death. One of our sergeants, Colmith, came to me after a particularly brutal battle. He said the humans were singing while they fought. Not war songs or battle chants, but happy songs, children's songs. They were treating the battle like a game. Nirasai S. Pen stopped moving. Children's songs. A human soldier, badly wounded, was singing something about sunshine and rainbows while throwing grenades at our tanks. Colmith said it was the most terrifying thing he had ever heard. The old commander finished his drink and signaled for another. The worst incident happened on day 4. Our heavy assault unit broke through human lines and reached their command bunker. They found a human female, barely alive, surrounded by the bodies of her comrades. She looked up at our soldiers and started laughing. Yulgath said, blood streaming down her face, multiple wounds, probably minutes from death, and she was laughing. Then she activated a bomb that killed herself and 12 of our best warriors. Why? Nirasai whispered. Because she could. Yulgath replied. Because humans would rather die than let their enemies have even a small victory. We learned that lesson over and over during those 6 days. The recording device captured the silence that followed, along with the soft sounds of other veterans moving through the center like broken spirits. That was just New Geneva. Yulgath said finally, one small colony world. We had no idea that every human world would be the same. Yulgath stared at his fresh drink. The blue liquid reflecting the dim lights of the veteran center. His compound. I seemed to focus on something far away, something that still haunted his dreams even now, years after the war had ended. New Geneva was just the beginning, he said slowly. After 6 days of hell, we finally took the planet, but it felt like a defeat. We had lost 3,000 soldiers taking a world that should have cost us maybe 50 casualties. Nirasai looked up from her notes. But you did win that battle. Surely the High Command was pleased. A bitter laugh escaped from the old commanders. Throat, pleased. They were terrified. The casualty reports didn't make sense. How could a primitive species cause so much damage? They ordered us to study everything. Human tactics, weapons, even their dead bodies. What did you find? The reporter asked. Nothing that helped us. Yulgath replied. Human technology was basic. Their weapons were simple. Their armor was weak. On paper, they should have been easy to defeat. But there was something else. Something we didn't understand until it was too late. He took a long drink before continuing. 3 weeks after New Geneva, We attacked their mining colony at Ross Station. This time, we brought twice as many ships and soldiers. We had studied human tactics and prepared countermeasures for everything they had done before. The battle lasted 10 days instead of 6, he said quietly. Mirasai's pen stopped moving. 10 days. But you had more forces and better preparation. That's what made it so terrifying. Yulkov explained. The humans at Ross Station had studied. US2, every tactic we used at New Geneva, every weakness they had shown, all of it was different. The old warrior's voice grew hollow as he remembered. Their lead engineer was someone called Choi. According to our intelligence, he was just a mining specialist with no military training. But in 3 weeks, he had turned Ross Station into a fortress we couldn't break. How? Mirasai asked. Our plasma shields, Yulka said. They had protected our ships for over 2,000 years. No known weapon could penetrate them. But Choi had somehow built bullets that went right through them like they weren't even there. The reporter's antenna twitched in disbelief. That's impossible. Our greatest scientists spent centuries perfecting those shields. Choi did it in 3 weeks, Yulgov repeated, using parts from mining equipment and scrap metal from our destroyed ships at New Geneva. He turned garbage into weapons that could kill our most advanced warships. The old commander's hands shook as he continued. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how fast they learned during the battle itself. What do you mean? Our battle formations, Yulkith explained. We use the spiral of victory, a tactical pattern that has won us hundreds of battles across the galaxy. It takes our officers years to master. He paused, staring at the recording device. A human tactical officer named Hun watched us use it twice. Just twice, on the 3rd day of battle. He sent his ships in a counter-pattern that destroyed half our fleet. Nirasari felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. He learned your formation into battles. Not just learned it, Yulka said. He understood it better than we did. He found weaknesses in the spiral of victory that our own military schools had never noticed. Weaknesses that had been there for centuries, waiting for someone smart enough to see them. The veteran center grew quieter as other patrons sensed the weight of the conversation. Even the staff moved more carefully, afraid to disturb the testimony being recorded. The humans kept doing this. Yulkith continued. Every battle, they were different. Every engagement. They had new tricks. It was like fighting an enemy that evolved between attacks on Kepler 7. They captured one of our gravitic mines, he said. These are complex weapons that take our engineers months to build. A human scientist named Kang took one apart and rebuilt it in 5 days. But his version was twice as powerful and half the size. The reporter wrote frantically, trying to capture every detail. How is that possible? Humans think differently than us. Yulkov explained. We see a perfect design and try to copy it exactly. Humans see a design and immediately think of ways to make it better. They can't help themselves. By the 6th month of the war, they were using our own weapons against us. He continued, but their versions were always improved somehow. Faster, stronger, more efficient. We were being beaten by our own technology. The old commander's voice became very quiet. The breaking point came at the Battle of Wolfsten. We brought our newest prototype warship, the Devastator. It had taken our best engineers 50 years to design. The humans captured it. Mirasai asked. Worse, Yulka said. They destroyed it using a modified version of our own ship designs. A human named Song had studied our engineering reports from previous battles and built something we had never imagined possible. What had he built? A ship that could eat other ships. Yulgoth whispered. It fired a weapon that turned our armor into fuel for its own systems. The more we shot at it, the stronger it became. The recording device captured the long silence. That followed. Finally, Yulgoth spoke again. That's when we realized we weren't fighting a primitive species, he said. We were fighting a race of natural-born engineers who could improve anything they touched. Every battle made them stronger, while making us weaker. The veteran center had grown almost silent around them. Other wounded soldiers seemed to sense that something important was being shared. And they moved like ghosts through the dim halls, careful not to disturb the interview that might finally explain their nightmares. Yulgoth Estring sat and touched as he gathered strength for the next part of his story. His scarred hands trembled slightly as he began to speak again. After 8 months of fighting, our high command made a decision. He said quietly, they decided that humans were too dangerous to be allowed to exist as soldiers, so they ordered us to target their civilian populations instead. Mira Sai looked up from her notes. Confused civilians. But that's standard conquest procedure. Threaten the non-combatants and the military forces surrender to protect them. That's what we thought would happen. Yulgoth replied, every other species in the galaxy follows this pattern. Soldiers fight, civilians hide, leaders negotiate. It's how intelligent beings behave. He paused, his compound eyes reflecting old pain. Humans don't follow patterns. What happened? The reporter asked softly. We bombed 3 civilian cities on their world called Harmony Prime. Yulgoth said, 50,000 dead in the first attack. We sent a message to their military command, demanding surrender or we would destroy more cities. The old commander's voice became hollow. Their response was a single word, no. But surely the civilian populations demanded protection. Mirasai asked. That's what we expected, Yulgoth said instead. Something incredible happened. The civilians didn't run, or hide or demand their government surrender. They armed themselves. He reached for his drink with shaking hands. An old human named Ryu lived on a farming world called Green Valley. He was 70 years old. Had never been a soldier, spent his whole life growing food. When our ships appeared in his sky, he should have evacuated. What did he do instead? He turned his farming equipment into weapons. Yulgoth said simply. His crop harvesting machines became missile launchers. His irrigation pumps became armor for his house. His fertilizer became explosives. The reporter's pen stopped moving. One old farmer destroyed 2 of our landing craft and killed 47 soldiers before we could stop him, Yulgoth confirmed. But that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was that he wasn't alone. What do you mean every human on that world did the same thing? The commander explained. Children as young as 8 years old, led by a girl named Min, created an intelligence network that tracked our every movement. They appeared and disappeared like spirits, always watching, always reporting our positions to their fighters. Yulgoth's voice grew darker. We couldn't move anywhere without human children knowing about it. They used toys as communication devices. They hid in places we never thought to look. They turned games into warfare. But children can't be effective soldiers, Nirasai protested. They weren't soldiers, Yulgoth said. They were something worse. They were spies who looked innocent, but saw everything, every time we planned an attack. Somehow the human military knew exactly where we were going. The old warrior stood up. Slowly, his joints creaking from old wounds. He walked to the window and stared out at the alien city beyond. The worst was their merchant captain named Seo. He said without turning round. She ran supply ships between human colonies, completely civilian. No military training, no weapons. What did she do? When we attacked her convoy, she should have surrendered or run away, Yulka said. Instead, she turned her cargo ship into a weapon. She filled it with mining explosives and rammed it into our destroyer. He turned back to face the reporter. One cargo ship, one civilian pilot. She destroyed a warship that cost us 50 years to build and carried 800 crew members. That's suicide, Mirasai whispered. That's what made humans so terrifying, Yulkuth replied. They didn't see it as suicide. They saw it as victory. Every human death that took some of us with them was a win in their minds. He sat back down heavily. Within months, every human civilian had become a potential weapon. Their merchants carried bombs instead of cargo. Their farmers grew poisons instead of food. Their children became our worst nightmare. How could an entire species coordinate like that? The reporter asked. That's what we couldn't understand, Yulka said. Other species have governments that can be conquered, leaders that can be killed or corrupted. But humans seemed to think as one giant organism. When we killed the leaders, new ones appeared instantly. When we destroyed their command centers, they commanded themselves. When we cut their communications, they found new ways to coordinate. His voice became very quiet. We realized we weren't fighting an army or even a government. We were fighting an entire species that had decided we needed to die. On the world called New Texas, we intercepted a message from a human mother to her children. He continued. She said, "Remember, babies, every alien you kill is one less that might hurt other human children someday." Children were being taught to kill us as soon as they could walk, Yulka said. Grandparents were making weapons with their grandchildren. Entire families were becoming military units. The recording device captured his final words about this phase of the war. We weren't conquering a civilization anymore. We were fighting for survival against a species that had turned every member into a soldier. The twin sons of Zephyr Prime were sitting outside the Veteran Center, casting long shadows across the floor where Yulgath and Neasui sat. The recording device had been running for hours, capturing what would become the most important interview in Zephyrian history. Yulgath looked older now, as if telling his story had aged him even more. His scarred hands wrapped round his empty cup as he prepared to share the final chapter of humanity's war. Against his people, the end came in the strangest way. He said quietly, not with a great battle or a final charge, but with a conversation. Mira leaned forward, her pen ready. A conversation. The High Command finally realized what we were truly fighting. Yulgath explained. After 2 years of war, we had learned that defeating humans completely would require killing every last one of them, not just their soldiers, not just their leaders, but every man, woman, and child in their entire species. The old commander's voice grew heavy. And the humans had made it clear that such a victory would cost us everything we had. They would make us pay so much that winning would destroy our empire. So they sent me to negotiate, he continued, not surrender. The humans had made it clear they would never surrender, but to find some way to end the war before both our species were extinct. Who did you meet with? The reporter asked. A human named Jang, Yulkith said. He was there, supreme military commander, a man who had been fighting us for the entire war. When I first saw him, I was shocked. Why? He looked so ordinary. The commander explained. Medium height, graying hair, simple clothes. He could have been any human you might pass on the street. But his eyes held the weight of his entire species. Yulgath stood up slowly and walked back to the window. We met on a neutral station in empty space. Just the two of us and our translators. I expected to negotiate with a politician or a diplomat. Instead, I found myself face to face with someone who spoke for all of humanity. What did he say? Mirasai asked softly. He thanked me for coming, Yulkith said. Then he told me something I will never forget. He said, Commander, your people made a mistake when you decided to hunt us. We are not prey animals. We are what ate all the prey animals on our world. The reporter felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. What did he mean? He explained human history to me. Yulkith replied, how their species had survived ice ages that killed most life on their planet. How they had hunted creatures 10 times their size with nothing but sharpened sticks and teamwork. How they had turned every disaster into an opportunity to become stronger. Zhang told me that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history preparing to fight something like us. The commander continued. Not consciously, but through millions of years of surviving impossible odds. Yulkith turned back to face the reporter. He said something that still gives me nightmares. He said, we are the species that made saber-toothed cats and cave bears. Extinct. We are the descendants of the creatures that survived when our own planet tried to kill us. What made you think you could do what our own world couldn't? Did he threaten you? Mirasai asked. No, Yulkith said. That was the most terrifying part. He didn't need to threaten me. He just explained the facts. What facts? That humans had been holding back. The commander said quietly. Everything we had seen. The suicide attacks, the civilian resistance, the impossible tactics. That was them being careful not to completely destroy us. Holding back. The reporter's voice cracked. Zhang showed me reports from their military scientists. Yulkith explained. Weapons they had designed but chosen not to use, strategies they had developed but held in reserve. They had been fighting us with one hand tied behind their backs. The old warrior sat back down. His legs too weak to support him. He told me that humans had 3 rules for war. First, try to avoid it. Second, if you can't avoid it, end it quickly. Third, if you can't end it quickly, make sure your enemy regrets starting it. Which rule were they following with us? Nirasai whispered. They were moving to Rule 3, Yulkith said. Zhang explained that if we continued the war, they would stop trying to minimize our casualties. They would stop protecting our civilians. They would stop holding back their most terrible weapons. What did you do? I asked him what he wanted. Yulkith replied. His answer was simple. He wanted us to go home and never come back. He wanted us to spread the word to every other species in the galaxy that humans were to be left alone. And in return, they would let us live. The commander said. They would allow our wounded to be treated. They would help us rebuild our damaged ships. They would even share some of their technology with us. Mirasai stared at her. Notes in disbelief. They offered to help you after you tried to destroy them. That's what made the offer so terrifying. Yulkith explained. It wasn't mercy. It was a demonstration of power. They were showing us that they were so much stronger than us that they could afford to be. Generous, the recording device captured. The long silence that followed. Finally, the old commander spoke again. I accepted their terms immediately, he said. I had seen enough of human warfare to know that we were fortunate they were willing to let us. Surrender, the reporter turned. Off a recording device, her hands shaking. What does this mean for our people, for the galaxy? Yulkith's compound eyes met hers with the weight of terrible knowledge. It means we were lucky. He said simply, we thought we were apex predators ruling the galaxy. But humans are something else entirely. They are the species that survived. By eating apex predators, he stood up slowly, preparing to leave. My advice to you, young reporter, is to make sure everyone knows this story. Make sure every species in the galaxy understands what humans really are. "What are they?" Narration asked. "They are the species that turns extinction into evolution," Yulka said. "They are what happens when a world tries to kill its children and fails. They are the nightmare that survived its own nightmares." He walked toward the exit, then paused and looked back, and prayed to whatever gods you believe in that they remain our friends. Because if they ever decide we are a threat again, there won't be enough of us left to remember what we used to call ourselves. The old commander disappeared into the gathering darkness, leaving behind only his words and the terrible truth they contained. In the quiet of the Veteran Center, Narasai sat alone with her recording device, knowing she held the most important story their species had ever heard outside. The stars were beginning to appear in the alien sky, each one a reminder of how vast and dangerous the galaxy had become since they had awakened something that should have been left sleeping.